do we handle life? When life is handling us. When life is handling us, the text says that we need to grieve. We look in verse 20. It says it like this. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshiped God. Job tore his robe and he shaved his head because it was a violent act of grief that symbolizes the pain that is going on inside of him. So why was Job grieving? Was it just because he had lost his possessions? Partly right, but not the whole account. Was it because he had lost his family? Partly right, but it's not the full account. Could it be that he was upset because his sacrifice didn't go through? Let me argue this text. Verse 5, if we back up, talks about Job rising early in the morning. It says it like this. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them. He would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of all of them. For Job said, it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God. We see that Job has a ritual of waking up early in the morning on the days that his children are making a feast. Some scholars suggest, because the text says, that he does it at the end of their feast. But some scholars suggest that this is not just at the end of the feast, but during the entire feast. All the days that they are eating, he wakes up early in the morning and he begins to get on his knees and he begins to sacrifice what he has to God, saying, maybe they have cursed God and maybe I need to go ahead and make amends for it. And so you see Job just getting up from his sacrifice, and the first messenger comes and begins to give him the bad news. So you can only imagine that if this is something that he does all the time, Lord, I've always sacrificed to you after they've feasted. Lord, I've always sacrificed to you after they've gone out and partied, but now the sacrifice did not get to you. How could it not get to you when every other time you accept it, but this time you don't? And so now Job is having to grieve because he's acting as if he's a teacher's pet. You know the teacher's pet, the one that's always sitting in the front row. The one that's always writing on the chalkboard for the teacher. The one that sends the teachers apples and the fruit baskets. And matter of fact, their parents probably tell them to send something to the teacher. You know, that one that always has the answers, the teacher's pet. He's always doing something right, but every once in a while, he might get in trouble for something. Every once in a while, he might have to deal with some trouble in the classroom, and he gets confused because he says, well, I'm doing everything that you've asked me. I stand in front of the classroom all the time, right on the chalkboard for you. I go and give you apples. I go and answer the questions right. Why am I dealing with this type of persecution in your classroom? Job in the text is that teacher's pet. He has done everything right according to God, and yet he's still dealing with pain. Somebody in here comes to church every Sunday. Somebody in here comes to Wednesday night every Wednesday. Somebody in here witnesses on their job and out in the streets, pays their tithes, but now they're dealing with some hell in their life because they don't understand that your sacrifice does not necessarily mean you won't go through persecution. And so Job tears his robe and shaves his head in grief. Again, this is an outward expression of his pain. You know, Western civilization has turned it into an inward expression. They don't want to see anybody cry. Men can't cry. Men can't have feelings. Men can't be sad. Women have to hold it inside as much as they want to cry. We tell them, don't cry. Every time we look around in our civilization, we see that the emotions that we have are always held on the inside. But let me argue this case. Did Jesus not grieve when he heard about Lazarus dying right before he raised him from the dead? Did Jesus not want to go to a desolate place after he heard about his beloved cousin John the Baptist being beheaded? I would suggest that he was trying to grieve. Did God not grieve for fallen creation after we fell from grace right before he flooded the earth? If it's good enough for God to grieve, why do we think we can't grieve? The evidence of holding our grief in is Virginia Tech. When your emotions stay inside of you worshiping. Look here, verse 20. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. We see that Job begins to make a transition in his pain. He's feeling the grief. He's feeling the pain. He's feeling the hurt and the loss of his possessions and his children. But then he transitions by positioning himself for worship. The text says that he tore his robe. He fell down. He shaved his head. And then he fell down and worshiped. He changed his position from standing up to on the ground. When you fall on your face, it is a symbol of humility. You know, there are different civilizations that have different bowing techniques when you come before somebody that is of high stature to show that you are humble. Mother and I were watching a movie yesterday about John Adams, and they were running through this thing that he had to do in front of the king. When you step in the front door, you have to make sure that you bow. When you get halfway, you have to make sure that you bow again. And if you don't bow low enough, the king is not pleased and he could kill you. When you get right in front of the throne, you then have to bow again. You know, other civilizations, they make you run up and kiss the feet of the person that's sitting in the good chair.